Dead Sea has been declining over 1 meter per year since the 1960s, when we started water diversions from Israel, Syria, and Jordan. And the consequences of this water diversion is what we see around us.
The Dead Sea has been called a place where life itself goes to die. Its waters are so toxic that no fish swim, no plants grow, and no creature survives. But now, something strange may be stirring in those cursed waters, something Ezekiel himself once foresaw. Could the world's saltiest sea be hiding the first flickers of life? Or is prophecy unfolding before our eyes? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear might leave you questioning everything. Before we can even begin to ask whether prophecy is unfolding, we need to understand where this whole mystery plays out. Have you ever wondered why the Dead Sea has such a chilling reputation? What makes the Dead Sea so different that people call it both a wonder and a curse? Let's take a closer look. A unique natural wonder. Standing on the edge of a lake that looks calm and inviting, you soon realize it hides a secret in every ripple. The Dead Sea rests at the lowest point on Earth's surface, a deep blue pool bordered by white salt crusts and rugged cliffs that seem frozen in time. Scientists call it a hypersaline lake, meaning its waters are so packed with minerals and salts that they are 10 times saltier than the regular ocean. Because of these extreme conditions, fish and plants cannot survive, and this is exactly why people long ago named it the Dead Sea. Despite the bleak title, the shores are full of activity. Travelers come to float without effort, read a book on their backs, and cover their skin with dark mud. For generations, people have believed the black mud and mineral-rich waters hold healing qualities. In ancient times, kings and queens visited these shores, and today, clinics still recommend controlled Dead Sea treatments for certain skin conditions. While it is not a cure, some patients find short-term relief, and the experience itself is unlike anywhere else. To scientists, the word dead is misleading. It doesn't necessarily mean empty. You see, the lake does not host fish, yet it is not completely empty of life, and in recent years, divers have found underwater springs where fresh water seeps through the salty crust, creating craters filled with microbial mats. These microscopic communities thrive in narrow zones where fresh water and brine meet. They do not change the chemistry of the whole sea, yet their presence tells a story of survival in one of Earth's harshest waters. The water here is not only salty, but is rich in magnesium and other ions that influence everything, from the way the Dead Sea's surface ripples to how quickly sweat evaporates on your skin when you touch it. To scientists, chemistry matters because it pushes the boundaries for what microbes can tolerate. For visitors, the unique chemistry of the water matters because floating in the Dead Sea feels completely different from floating anywhere else. The very minerals that make survival impossible for fish turn a quick swim into what feels, for many, like a normal holiday. However, the picture is not the same as it once was in the beginning. Since the mid-90s, the Dead Sea has been shrinking. Rivers that once fed it, especially the Jordan River, have been diverted to supply farms and cities. As the shoreline pulls back, the land becomes unstable. Fresh groundwater dissolves and buries salt deposits, leaving hollow spaces that suddenly collapse into sinkholes. Well, sinkholes are sudden holes that open up in the ground when the land above loses its support. Around the Dead Sea, they happen because fresh groundwater seeps in and dissolves the thick layers of salt left behind as the sea keeps shrinking. Once that salt is gone, the surface has nothing solid to rest on, so it collapses. What you get is a deep pit that can appear without warning, sometimes big enough to swallow palm trees, cars, or whole chunks of road. Now, over the years, so many sinkholes have formed and they've taken over areas people once used, like parking lots for tourists, groves where date palms grew, and even parts of the highway. In other words, land that was once safe and useful is now full of gaping holes, making it dangerous and unusable. Even some beaches once open to the public are now abandoned, and access to the water has become more dangerous in certain areas. These changes have forced scientists to look deeper, not only at the shrinking shoreline, but at what is happening below the surface itself. That's why in 2024, new studies revealed strange chimney-like towers rising from the lakebed. They are called white smokers, which release briny water where underground salt meets fresh inflow. Scientists believe such structures may even signal where future sinkholes could open along the coast. They also show us that the Dead Sea, though shrinking, is not static. It is alive in a geological sense, constantly reshaped by salt, water, and time. And now, this leaves us with a puzzling question. How can a lake too salty for fish be a magnet for health seekers? How can a place called dead still foster hidden colonies of microbes? And why does a shoreline that has appeared timeless now change so quickly year after year? If new springs continue to surface and conditions keep shifting, could these changes open the door for more forms of life than we ever expected? It leaves the question hanging, making us wonder what might come next. We've seen what makes the Dead Sea such a strange place in nature, but what did Ezekiel really see when he spoke about these waters? And why are people still debating his words today? The biblical basis, Ezekiel's prophecy. Ezekiel's story begins in exile, where he became a priest who later turned prophet during one of Israel's darkest hours, when Jerusalem had fallen and its people were dragged into Babylon. His early messages were heavy with warnings about judgment, but later his visions pointed toward hope, rebuilding, and a future only God could arrange. This is the voice behind one of Scripture's most striking scenes about water and life returning to a barren landscape. The vision unfolds in Ezekiel 47. Here, Ezekiel reveals that water begins to flow from the threshold of a restored temple, moving east toward the Jordan Valley and down into the basin that holds the Dead Sea. In this vision, Ezekiel hears his heavenly guide explain that when this water reaches the salty sea, the water there becomes fresh. He is told that swarms of living creatures will thrive wherever the river goes, and that there will be very many fish. The image builds toward a surprising line. Its fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean. Fishermen will stand along the shores, spreading nets. The picture is vivid, practical, and rooted in places his listeners knew. Well, that's not all. Ezekiel even used landmarks to specify the settings. He named the western shore En-Gedi, and towards the east side, he called it En-Eglaim. These points frame the Dead Sea almost from one side to the other, signaling that the entire stretch is transformed into a working fishery. In other words, the prophecy does not hint at a small pond or a corner cove. It points to a transformed coastline where nets are worth casting again. Now, the question, of course, is how to interpret it. For many, the prophecy is more than just geography. The river stands for renewal flowing out from God's presence. After chapters about loss and exile, Ezekiel's water signals renewal spilling outward from God's presence, a fresh start for a people who thought their future had dried up. The temple in the vision represents God dwelling with his people. The water that deepens as it flows stands for life that multiplies beyond human power. In this reading, the Dead Sea is a canvas for hope rather than a map to decode. But for others, they take the vision more literally. They believe the prophecy describes real landscapes and real change still to come. The river, in their view, will one day physically freshen the Dead Sea, and its shores will be lined with actual fishermen hauling in nets heavy with diverse species, just as Ezekiel described. They believe that En-Gedi and En-Eglaim will become more than landmarks, defining the new borders of a changed coastline. On another spectrum, we have those who walk in the middle line, which are the scholars. They point out that prophets often use familiar landscapes to make spiritual truths concrete. To them, a swelling river speaks to abundance in a way words alone can't. Fishermen lining the shore paints a picture of stability, food, and shared life. Whether symbolic or literal, Ezekiel chose the most lifeless body of water his audience could imagine, and he filled it with life. That tension between real geography and layered meaning is part of why this vision still captures attention. However one chose to interpret it, the text is clear about the sequence. The water originates at the temple, flows east through the Arabah, enters the Dead Sea basin, and turns salt into something that sustains life. Then the living creatures will come, many fish, and a working shoreline. It is a movement from sacred source to public blessing, from a single spring to a whole ecosystem restored. The focus is not on human engineering or luck, it is on what happens when life-giving water moves into dead places. But now, since we cannot rewrite the Bible, it is still ideal to ask, could Ezekiel's barren water be that same lake, famous for salt and silence, envisioned as teeming with fish in a future only God could bring about? People of faith answer this in different ways. Some find their hope in the symbolism of renewal, others hold to a concrete fulfillment still to come. Now, stories from the past are one thing, but what happens when science starts uncovering things that don't quite fit the old picture? The Dead Sea has been full of surprises lately, and one discovery in particular has caught the world's attention. Discoveries of living fish. What's going on? Headlines have a way of running faster than the facts, and over the past few years, stories have popped up online claiming that a living fish has been spotted in the Dead Sea, with some even framing it as a sign of prophecy stirring to life. The thought alone is gripping. A lake famous for tranquility and salt, suddenly holding signs of life? Yet, when you step closer, the truth turns out to be more layered, more surprising, and in some ways, more fascinating than the rumors themselves. Firstly, let's clarify that there is no verified discovery of fish living in the deep, open waters of the Dead Sea. The waters of the Dead Sea are still far too salty for fish to survive. Nothing with scales and fins is darting through its open depths. What scientists have documented, especially since the 1990s, are tiny forms of life that have learned how to handle extremes. Microscopic algae can bloom in the water after heavy rains dilute the salinity for a short time. Salt-loving microorganisms, called archaea, also thrive in those brief windows, sometimes coloring the water red or orange. These are remarkable organisms in their own right, survivors that prove life can find a way even in places that seem unlivable. But then again, they are not fish. They show that the Dead Sea is never as simple as it looks. Even beneath the surface, there is another layer added to it. Divers exploring the lake have discovered hidden freshwater springs bubbling up from the sea floor. It's more like pockets of cool water rising through salt-heavy layers, carving small craters and creating spots where microbes gather and grow. These springs do not change the lake's harsh chemistry overall, but they create microhabitats where life manages to cling on. It is a striking discovery, though it still does not bring larger aquatic creatures into the Dead Sea itself. So now, where do these fish reports come from? To answer that, one has to look at the edges of the sea. The thing is, the Dead Sea is shrinking, dropping by more than a meter every year. As the shoreline retreats, the land collapses in some places, forming sinkholes. Many of these holes fill up with fresh or slightly brackish water seeping up from underground. In those pools, people have taken photos of small fish swimming. Local journalists and the Dead Sea Revival Project have shared images that began circulating across the globe. Now, seen without context, a snapshot of fish against the backdrop of the Dead Sea can make it look like something miraculous has happened. But reality is more grounded because the fish are in freshwater pools near the Dead Sea, not in the salty lake itself. To understand this clearly, think of three zones. The first is the Dead Sea proper, where fish cannot live. The second is the natural springs and oases that have long dotted the region, like the Ain Feshka Reserve, where species like the tiny Dead Sea toothcarp have been holding on for centuries. The third is the new sinkhole pools, forming along the receding shore, where fish from nearby springs or groundwater systems sometimes end up. When news articles or photos don't spell out which zone they are talking about, it is easy for the story to get blurred. The presence of fish near the Dead Sea is not actually new. For a long time, spring-fed wetlands and small streams along the shore have supported fish populations. What feels new is the appearance of fish in sinkholes that only recently opened up, in places where visitors expect nothing but salt crust. To the casual eye, it feels like life has suddenly appeared in the very place it was least expected. That surprise has helped fuel the buzz. Occasionally, there are even reports of a larger fish being seen in the Dead Sea. These claims usually lack hard evidence because there are no salinity readings, no independent checks, and no follow-up by scientists. Without that, they remain stories rather than discoveries. By contrast, studies of the Dead Sea's chemistry remain consistent. That is, the lake's salinity is too extreme for fish to survive in its main waters. However, there is also a common mix-up worth clearing. People sometimes assume that any salty lake with life must have brine shrimp. Let's talk about the Great Salt Lake in Utah, for example, which is famous for its brine shrimp. Now, by comparison, when we look back at the Dead Sea, it is chemically different. It has no shrimp, no larger invertebrates, and certainly no fish. Its ecosystem is built on microorganisms that can survive where almost nothing else can. That uniqueness is part of its mystery, and part of why any real fish discovery in the Dead Sea would be such a scientific bombshell. So how should one make sense of the phrase living fish in this context? The most honest way is to acknowledge where the fish are actually found. They are alive in the region, in nearby springs, reserves, and sometimes in sinkholes that are filled with fresh water. When someone says fish are swimming in the Dead Sea, the key question is always, in what water? Fresh pockets or salty depths? Context makes all the difference. All of this circles back to the bigger question hanging over the discussion. Are these small signs along the shore connected in any way to Ezekiel's vision of a sea teeming with fish? The science, for now, is measured. Whether this is a passing curiosity or the early sign of something larger, it is a matter that moves beyond science into the realm of faith and interpretation. What can be said for certain is that the Dead Sea continues to surprise, and its story is far from finished. Not every strange report turns into a lasting mystery, yet this one does. What is it about this story that stirs up a lot of curiosity? What makes this fascinating? You see, when an old prophecy meets modern science, something sparks. People pay attention because two very different voices are weighing in on the same mystery. On one hand, you have a prophet painting hope with images drawn from everyday life. On the other, we have scientists with microscopes, sonar, and satellite maps uncovering things no one expected to find around the Dead Sea. That tug between faith and evidence is what transforms a calm environmental story into something people debate in churches, classrooms, and even anywhere. At its core, the fascination isn't complicated, and we all know human beings are drawn to stories of renewal. Ezekiel's vision of fish swimming in waters once thought dead carries a promise that endings aren't always final. So when news breaks about fresh springs bubbling near the lake or strange microbial communities thriving against the odds, people naturally connect it to the ancient vision and wonder if they're witnessing the early chapters of something foretold long ago. There is also the pull of being a witness. People crave moments where they can say they saw change with their own eyes. A single photo of fish in a pool beside the Dead Sea does more than prove biology can adapt. To many, it feels like history is moving. That sense grows even stronger when media headlines frame it as a what-if story, daring audiences to pick a side, fill in the blanks, and pass it along. This is exactly how the narrative spreads and offers both a mystery to solve and a story to claim. Science, meanwhile, grounds the discussion in hard evidence. Over the past 2 decades, researchers have documented freshwater springs and microbial mats where groundwater mixes with brine at the lake floor. These findings explain why algae blooms sometimes appear and why certain salt-loving microorganisms can flourish in conditions most life can't survive in. The research, stretching from early expeditions to peer-reviewed studies, has given scientists a clearer picture of a hidden ecosystem that keeps surprising them. The surprises keep coming because the government and some universities have responded by stepping up to monitor the sea. Satellites, drones, and field surveys now track changes in water levels, salinity, and sinkhole risk with growing precision. Regional universities have developed tools to forecast sinkhole formation, while international teams continue to test massive proposals, such as channeling water from the Red Sea to stabilize the Dead Sea. None of these ideas are simple, and each carries environmental and political challenges, but they show that the future of the lake is being actively debated. Then we have the archaeologists, doing their own thing and adding another layer to the story. Excavations at sites like En Gedi and Qumran keep turning up artifacts and inscriptions that pull the world's attention back to this region. These finds don't confirm prophecy outright, yet they anchor the narrative in a place where history and text meet. Every shard, scroll, or tool unearthed tightens the link between the past and present, giving modern discoveries more weight in the public eye. So when people ask if Ezekiel's words should be read literally or as metaphor, the question lingers because both possibilities carry power. On one side, the lab reports and photographs offer real evidence of change. On the other, the prophecy frames that change as part of something larger. Now, when faith and science overlap, are we witnessing the truth or projecting our deepest hopes onto nature? Tell us what your thoughts are in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss any of our uploads. To enjoy more content like this, click on the next video on your screen.